There are many sensitive children, and quite a few probably are doing perfectly fine. They found ways that work for them. Maybe the class composition and size fits well with their temperament, so they don't really experience many challenges. They're able to deal with it. But some children might just really struggle. And we did find that in our work, when we look at the classroom quality, that in a classroom that has sort of good quality, the sensitive children are doing as fine as others. But in a classroom that might be a bit more challenging, maybe less emotional support from the teacher, a bit more chaos, that's where the sensitive children might be struggling a little bit more. So those three additional questions capture the potential challenges that children would experience in the classroom context. So the teachers get that feedback, and then we provide some suggestions. So as I mentioned, not every child that is sensitive will need specific support, but it's still helpful to know whether a child is highly sensitive or likely highly sensitive. It's not a diagnosis because it's not a disorder. It's not a problem in such. It's just that highly sensitive children, because of their sensitivity, might experience their classroom in a slightly different way. So it would be helpful, or they would benefit from potentially certain adjustments. So we provide a whole range of suggestions of how teachers might be able to support those children.
Beautiful. I know we can't go into all of the suggestions, but what are some of the top suggestions?
I think one obvious one is to minimize overstimulation, to be aware that if a lot is going on, if a lot is demanded of the child that picks up a lot of that information, process it more deeply, they will get overstimulated and get tired. So this could be due to the social context, but also due to the physical aspects of the classroom, the noise, the clutter, bright lights. So in order to minimize overstimulation, it's important to give them breaks. Maybe let them sit alone, maybe in smaller groups, maybe at the edge of a group to reduce the sensory input. Maybe they would benefit from having headphones to sort of provide some more quiet, and providing quiet spaces and opportunities to maybe read a book or something that sort of reduces the stimulation. So that would be a key one. Another one is to give them the time that they need to reflect on things, because they're deep thinkers. So if you ask them a question, they probably don't want to be put on the spot right away, but they would prefer having time to think it through, and then they would probably are happy to present their thoughts and share what they concluded. So they may need extra time to think or answer questions. Another one is to emphasize positive relationships, because sensitive children are particularly responsive to social cues, and they like to get along with others, and they're easily aware of if things don't go well or if someone is not feeling well. So they really thrive on positive interactions. That means discipline can be experienced quite more severely by them than others. So they probably benefit from more gentle discipline and not being told off in front of everyone, and not being spoken to in a harsh way, because these children tend to take criticism to heart, and they're actually quite responsive to gentle discipline. So the harsher discipline is wasted on them, it actually harms more than does good. And I think because they are sensitive, they might often view their sensitivity as an issue. They might wonder what's wrong with them. Why can't they do things the way that other people do? Why can't they just brush off something like someone else can do? Why do they seem to be so affected by that? Or why do they get tired more quickly? So it's good to build their self-esteem and emphasize their strengths that they have, that they might not necessarily see themselves, as we are usually less aware of our strength and more aware of our weaknesses.
Michael, what I love about everything that you're saying here is that it's so focused on how do we nurture their sensitivity where we go. This is actually an incredible gift that you have as you're talking about that depth of processing, as you're talking about that creativity, that empathy. And all of the guidance that you're giving right now is how do we nurture that? How do we help them to go, this is who I am in the world, instead of this is something that I need to change, which I think unfortunately is a message that many of our kids are often given by society and by school.
Yeah, I think it's key to acknowledge their specific strengths and what they contribute, and to emphasize that rather than just focusing on maybe the behavior that we expect from children, such as raising their hand and saying the right answer and maybe being more resilient and all of that. I think it's important to acknowledge the skills that their sensitive children have. So what we actually find is that in Western cultures, there's less appreciation of sensitivity or introversion. These are two different things, but they're sort of sometimes a bit related. Whereas in other cultures, for example, in China, there's much more appreciation for the sensitive individuals because they're considered as being wise, they're considered as being considerate. So there's much more appreciation in certain cultures of sensitivity. In the West, particularly the more individualistic cultures such as the US or Canada or the UK, I think there's less appreciation for sensitive individuals, for adults, but also for children. So there's not much appreciation of what they bring to the table. So I think it's key to sort of see the value in what they are able to bring to the table and to let them know about that as well.
Oh, that resonates so much with me because I think the messages I hear all the time is how do you give your kid more confidence? How do you get them to stand up for themselves? How do you get them to speak up in class? But there's also not that flip side of going, how do we actually create spaces for these children to be able to have that time to process, to be able to speak their thoughts that have been deeply processed? And I don't think right now, and I know you're working so hard to kind of flip this dynamic, but I don't think right now that those core features in children are always seen.
No, certainly not. I think that there is a growing awareness of sensitive children. A lot of that is not based on very good science or not on science at all, but we hope to make a difference with that by doing more research. There is a lot more research that's being done on these children. I think it's important to emphasize that these children not they don't have superpowers either. It's not like, they're just children, but they perceive their environment in a slightly different way. It's
Hmm.
not necessarily that they have a sixth sense, but they perceive more what goes on around them. They
Hmm.
process that more deeply, and that has some disadvantages in the sense that they will be more negatively affected by adverse experiences. They might be more overwhelmed by stressful experiences, but at the same time, they might be able to really engage with a topic in much more depth. They might pick up on a lot more detail, and they might really understand other people very well. So many therapists, many coaches are likely going to be highly sensitive people because these are the skills that you need to work with others. You really need to be able to put yourself into the shoes of someone else and sort of have that level of empathy, which these children are fantastic.